Yes, Richard Allen has appealed the wrongful conviction, most likely wrongful conviction in the Delphi 4 murders. The conviction that happened last year. Now comes the appeal in December of 2025, and it's a huge one. Part 1 is already in the bag. I'm late to this case because when I started YouTube, this case was already done. There was a conviction in the case, and a lot of you asked me to pick it up, or at least talk about it. And now that the appeal has been filed, I am getting into the case a little bit, at least giving you my opinions of the appeal. It took me an hour and a half to give you the first bit of my review of the 113-page appeal. Now comes part 2. If you haven't done so, make sure you watch part 1. The devil's in the details. Let's go. All right, as I said, this is part 2, so part 1 is in the bag. It's a trial balloon on my channel. I'm testing it with people in my audience to see if my audience even gives a shit. I'm so late to the game. Everybody else has their favorite quote-unquote Delphi YouTube channel that they watch. I am not going to be it. I get that. But those who know my style of the presumption of innocence should know that this one goes right into the wheelhouse of the devil's advocates. We believe in the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And in this case, it certainly looks like Richard Allen did not get a fair trial at all. And that's what his attorneys are arguing in this 113-page appeal filed on December 17th, 2024, where they said, look, Richard Allen did not get a fair trial. He had exculpatory evidence withheld. The PCA was garbage to start with. Sounds a lot like another case we're following, Idaho 4. The PCA is complete garbage. Without that PCA being garbage, they wouldn't have gotten arrested in the first place. And if they hadn't gotten arrested in the first place, and if they had had a fair trial, would the accused have pled guilty? Did Richard Allen also plead guilty to something he didn't do because of the way our legal system works, which is that once they make a decision on who the person is that they want to go after it, you don't get a fair trial. It just goes to hell in the handbag very quick. I'm going to fix something real quick because I'm going to hear beeping the entire time I'm on my channel if I don't fix this. All right, so what I want to do now is get right into putting on screen the continuation, part 2 of my 113-page breakdown analysis of the appeal. Now, we're not going to get through all of this, even with an hour and a half in the bag. And now comes part 2. It'll probably be another, I'm guessing it's going to be another hour and a half. And there's going to be things that we're going to leave unsaid in this appeal. But I'm just getting my feet wet. Again, I'm super late to the case. So I'm going to jump right into it. This is where we left off on the part 1 and continuing on. This may be, by the way, this may be a members only video because I don't know that that first one's going to do very well at all. It may be too much for my audience to handle 6 cases because this would be a 6th case and we don't need another case like we need a hole in the head. So the part 1 may be available for the public as a teaser with the rest. It may be that the rest of my thoughts on Delphi could be members only. So make sure you subscribe right now. If you have never been to the channel, subscribe because I have a bunch of cases I follow. This is just one of them. If I do keep making it public, this is the way you're going to find out about it. Subscribe. All right, here we go. Point 5, a detail only the killer would know. Now, what we're discussing in this part of the document, the 113-page appeal, we're discussing what the jury did not hear. Okay, we earlier heard what the judge didn't hear. This is what the judge didn't hear, and that led to an arrest that probably should have never happened. And now we're hearing what the jury didn't hear that led to a conviction that probably never should have happened. So this is another detail that the jury did not hear. A detail only the killer would know is what this is titled. Brad Weber. Now, this individual, I'm very, very, very late to the game. This individual, Brad Weber, and what they're going to tell you happened in this case. This guy, I'm sure for many of you who follow this case, is prime suspect number 1. Maybe he's been ruled out for some other reason that I don't know. But when I look at this document, I'm like, holy shit. How did they go after Richard Allen first and not this guy? Listen to this story. It gets nuts. Some of the things that are come up here will be absolutely batshit crazy that they looked away from these people and went after Richard Allen, who, by the way, for 5.5 years after the murder, no one even gave a shit about Richard Allen. They never looked at him. He'd already been cleared. He'd already been cleared as a suspect. And 5.5 years later, somebody resurfaced a tip and went back and they convicted him of a crime that nobody even thought he was involved for 5.5 years. All right. Brad Weber, who lives near where the girls were found, told the jury that he left work in Lafayette around 2:02 p.m. and drove his white cargo van directly home, arriving around 2:22 to 2:27 p.m. The state claimed that Allen, that's Richard Allen, confessed to Dr. Walla, his psychiatrist in detention, that he attempted to rape the girls but was scared after seeing a van, which forced him to flee with the girls across the creek. This is critical timing and information, because what we're going to find out is the timing that Richard Allen claims that he saw the white van doesn't match up with when the white van actually went by. The man with the white van who said what time he went by lied about when he went by the scene. And it is my belief, and this is the hard part for many people to understand, it is my belief, interrogators told Richard Allen things about the case when they were trying to get his confession, and they told him over and over and over again, to the point that at some point he mentions, oh yeah, I saw this, a thing that never happened, not at the time they said it did. And then they added it as, see, this is proof. Richard Allen just told a detail of the crime that only the killer should know. That's what this is titled, the detail that only the killer should know. It was helped used to convict Richard Allen. The jury didn't hear all the facts, however. So the state claimed Allen confessed to his Dr. Walla that he attempted to rape the girls but was scared when seeing a van, which forced him to flee with the girls across the creek. Allen's statement, the state told the jury, contained a detail that only the killer would know. The state argued that Weber's arrival home in his van was what interrupted Allen, causing him to take Libby and Abby across Deer Creek to kill them. So the murder scene was so this is the murder scene now. I'm gonna warn you. So the van we're gonna come back to. The spoiler is the van didn't go by at the time that they said he did. The individual Weber lied about when he got home. He lied about it. They caught it in a lie. His van never went by at the time that the murders were happening. Therefore, Allen could not have seen the van go by that he said scared him and made him decide to pull off his rape and just kill the girls. That whole van situation couldn't have happened at the time that they said it did. Therefore, Allen did not remember the van like he says he did. That's the gist of this argument that they're pointing out. Now we're going to break down the murder scene, and I'm going to admit this murder scene is going to be really weird to describe. It's very complex, very complex. It's hard to read it and understand what's going on. There's a lot of pieces to it. In fact, one of the crux of the arguments, tell me this doesn't sound like Idaho 4, is that it's impossible for somebody who done everything that was done at that crime scene in the amount of time that they said it was done. Sounds a little bit like, really, do we believe that one person can kill 4 people on 2 floors of a house in 8 minutes and get out without tracking any blood in and out of the house? That's something that one human being can do when 3 of them are fighting back. Okay, I'm on a tangent. The point being is that the whole idea of one person can't do what you say that they did in the time that they said that they did it is coming up in this case as well. So pay attention to not just the confusing details of what happened at the crime scene, but imagine the time frame that we're going to be told it happened in, and how did that one guy do all that in this time? That's, again, the story. The murder scene was unusual and complex. Libby was naked, and Abby was wearing Libby's clothes. Abby's right leg was positioned underneath her left. I'm pausing for a moment because it's been a while since I read that. I want to make sure I got Abby and Libby correct, but I'm pretty sure I do. All right. Both girls' throats were cut with a sharp instrument. However, the injuries were different. Listen. Libby had so many incised wounds along her neck that it was difficult to determine the number. 11 to 13. So, sorry, that was a section. Sorry. 3 major vessels were injured. There was a scalloped edge along an incision. Now, this gets a little confusing. Later, Richard Allen will confess to having a box knife with him and that he cut the girls' throats with a box knife. The problem with the box knife confession is that's what I believe prosecutors told, law enforcement told Allen was used to kill the girls. And then he later, when he got broken in prison, said, yeah, I had a box knife. I killed him with a box knife. The problem is that they also had a serrated or scalloped edge along the incision. A scalloped edge means basically kind of like a wavy pattern knife, something that has a pattern to the blade. It's not just a straight edge blade. And so they know that one of the victims or more had injuries that were scalloped as well, meaning there was a different type of cutting blade than some straight edge razor like the box knife that Allen's going to confess to being used. And also that scalloped knife might play in to the ritual theory. And the ritual theory is much much crazily bigger than you imagine if you haven't followed the case. Again, most of you know what I'm talking about with the ritual thing. Anyone who's followed this case is way ahead of me on the ritual. I am coming up to speed on the ritual thing. All right, let's get on with it. Abby's throat was cut only once, not as deeply as Libby's throat. Abby was likely murdered while wearing Libby's clothes. Now, this is the weirdest thing. Listen again to the very beginning. Libby was naked and Abby was wearing Libby's clothes. Again, factor in what's happened at this crime scene. It's very hard to understand, but and you also have to factor in the time. So one of the girls was stripped naked and the clothes of that girl who was stripped naked was put on the other child, right? What the fuck's happening there? What the fuck's happening there? And how much time does it take to do these things? One of the girls' throats was tentatively cut. One throat was cut very deeply. They're very different. All right, now listen. Abby died in the location where she was found. But after Libby died, her 200-pound body was moved several yards to its final resting place. This created a V formation with the girls' bodies. This is, and we're going to see a diagram in a second. Here it is. There's the diagram. So see how the bodies are positioned, and there's also a blood stain or two drawn on this diagram. And you'll see one looks like it's naked, bare, right? With blood all over their hands, it looks like, and on their face. And the other is dressed in clothes. What they're saying is this person who's naked was moved, probably from that big, huge spot, I'm guessing, over to this other position to form a V with their bodies. Why is that important? Staging of the scene. Not only were, so let me lay down the argument as best I can. What they're saying, what they're suggesting is these bodies were staged in a way. Staged meaning it didn't just happen and the person ran away, as what might be expected with somebody who just randomly says, I'm going to rape these two girls. Oops, I got scared. I killed them and I ran. There wouldn't be staging involved. These bodies were staged, which also leads to the possibility of a ritual of some kind, staging the bodies in a ritualistic way, creating a V with the bodies, for example. And at first, I'll admit, when I heard it, I thought to myself, oh no, it's not going to be a ritual killing kind of thing. That rarely is actually the case. In this case, it might actually be, and it has way more teeth to it than I knew. You, again, who've been on this case for forever before I got to it, are like, yeah, DA, welcome to the club. It was a ritual killing. We've all known that. I get it. I'm late. I had a mental block on the ritual part, but I'm beginning to see it, and I'm beginning to think that's what happened. But let me explain why I got there. Because I'm reluctant. You got to kind of drag me a little kicking and screaming on the ritual thing. All right. So the bodies were formed in a V formation like this. Sticks. Sticks were deliberately arranged on the girls, covering no more than 3% of their body. Now look at this image above. You can see some little sticks drawn in. It looks like there's some sticks drawn in on the picture. Overlying their body, blue sticks. Those sticks are very, very minimal. The prosecution will say that the killer tried to hide the bodies under a pile of sticks. This is no fucking pile of sticks. Oh, I dropped an F-bomb. When I drop an F-bomb, I put parental advisory. Parental discretion is advised. It's a throwback from my days back as a child. So parental discretion is advised. And I always, when I drop my first F-bomb, I try to put that on there because I do drop a lot of F-bombs. All right. So look at the sticks that they've drawn in here. It's a few sticks, less than, so no more than 3% of their bodies. Also, I want to point out to you this important detail that I catch. If a killer is going to bury the bodies to hide them so that people won't find the bodies, more than likely you're going to bury, in my opinion, you're going to bury one body and then you're going to bury the next. What happened here is a few sticks were put on one body and a few sticks were putting on another body. You're not hiding shit. This picture is pretty accurate, in my opinion, of what it would look like when less than or approximately 3% of the body is covered. It's just a few sticks laid on top. You're not hiding those bodies with a few sticks. Yet they will try to convince the jury that the killer was trying to quickly hide the bodies. And again, if you're going to hide the bodies, wouldn't you bury one body in sticks and then go work on the other body and bury that body in sticks? Or would you throw a couple sticks on this one and a couple sticks on that one and call it good? It would have taken up to 20 minutes for Abby to die. Although Libby's injuries were more significant, it would have taken her between 5 and 10 minutes to die. So they're saying These girls did not die right away. It took somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes for the girls to die. One of which 10 to 15 minutes, or 5 to 10 minutes, and the other one a good 20 minutes to die. The blood pattern, and this is where it's going to get really, really confusing, and I want you to pay attention for the ritualistic possibility that the defense is even setting up with their appeal. They completely ignored the staging and ritualistic manner in which these murders were done, which was different than the crime of passion. Some horny old man sees a couple of opportune girls on a thing and says, I think I'm going to rape those girls because I got nothing better to do. The blood pattern on Abby's hands were noteworthy. When injured, people instinctively reach for their major wounds, getting blood on their hands and sleeves. Libby has substantial blood on her hands, but Abby had little to no blood on her hands or sleeves. The state's blood spatter expert had never seen clean hands and sleeves in a case involving this amount of blood loss. Never. They'd never seen that. The blood spatter expert doesn't understand how girls who are bleeding out and having their throat slit don't instinctively reach up and grab their throat and get blood all over their hands. One of the girls did and one didn't, which are keys to what happened in the case. The absence of blood may be consistent with unconsciousness or restraint. So yeah, if you're tied up, you can't reach up and grab your throat. But if that's the case, why was one girl tied up and one girl wasn't? But there are no defensive wounds, bruising, blunt force trauma, or ligature marks on either girl. So there's no indication the girl was knocked unconscious first, and that's why she didn't grab her throat when she was slit. There's no indication that she had ligature marks, meaning that she was tied up, bound, hand and foot, or something like that. So neither girl showed signs of being knocked unconscious or tied up. So why does one have blood on their hands, like they're trying to hold their throat or attack the wound, or the other one doesn't? What happened exactly? These are questions that should be answered and not easily explained by some guy decided that he, wanted to commit an opportune rape and got interrupted and left. The bodies were lying in the prone position, yet both girls' faces had blood patterns flowing upward against gravity over their chin and face. Now that's where it gets a little confusing and a little difficult. What it suggests to me is that one way to explain it, if the girls were upside down when their throats were cut, the blood would flow over their chin and over their face. Yet, when they're positioned and put into position, that's not the position the blood should have flowed. So in other words, what you see on the bodies is not the direction the blood should have flowed, again, indicating that the bodies were staged and moved, right? So I think that's what they're getting to. The blood that you see appears to have flown upwards against gravity. And so again, if their head is higher than the ground, how did blood get up on their face unless at some point they were upside down or their head was facing lower so that the blood could pour over their face? And I realize this is very, very graphic, but this is a crime scene, right? This is a true crime case. So we're discovering how the bodies were made. So this is a point of contention that the blood patterns on both the girls' faces had blood patterns that show the blood flowing upward against gravity over their chin and face. Thus, sometime during the murders, a person articulated the girls' torsos and necks above their chins. So listen, at some point, somebody took the bodies and put them in a position where their body and their neck would be higher than their chin so that the blood could pour over their face, kind of thing. It was clear someone lifted Libby's body to create a flow pattern. Lifted her body to create a flow pattern. Abby had a similar pattern, which meant that her body was also articulated to position where her neck was higher than her chin. This occurred while Abby was wearing Libby's clothes. So again, while it's super hard to understand what's happening, what it's saying is the girls' throats were slit and then they were put into a position, i.e. put in a maybe upside down position, so that the blood flowed from their upper over their face, and they were articulated to do that. Now, when you're slaughtering animals, for example, you would maybe hang them upside down to let them bleed out faster. I don't know if that's what they're saying, but the point being is that it's clear that the bodies were moved into a position to cause the flow of blood to happen the way that it did. About 4 feet off the ground, there was a notable blood pattern on a tree in Libby's blood, and they're going to show this as well. The yellow circle on this picture denotes how high up that blood stain is. The next panel beside it that you see with the ruler is a close-up of that blood. So you can't see it real well in the yellow circle, but that's how high up it is, well off the ground. So it's very high. In other words, maybe not somebody just slumped against the tree. And then here is the close-up of the blood pattern. The state performed a sexual assault kit on both girls and found no physical evidence of sexual assault. Despite testing the sexual assault kit, hundreds of clippings from the clothing and swabs from the girls' bodies, cartridge, and cell phone, law enforcement found no DNA from Alan. Listen, you tell me how a person who alleged that he was going to rape the girls, but then panicked and killed them, took time hastily putting some sticks on him, whatever, gets none of his DNA at the scene. None of his DNA at the scene. Now, I would argue, as many cases will prove, that they couldn't find his DNA there, but they probably didn't test other people's DNA because they already decided that Alan was going to be their guy, and so they didn't test the DNA against anybody else. That's a similar thing as I believe happened in the Kohberger case, but we'll put that aside. The state told the jury that Alan controlled the girls. So the state told the jury what happened, which is funny because I can't figure out what happened, but they've got it all figured out. The state told the jury that Alan controlled the girls. He swapped Abby's clothes, articulated their bodies, moved Libby all by himself before fleeing the scene at 4 p.m. The state's witness repeatedly claimed that Alan used sticks as camouflage, and he moved Libby's body to make it harder to see. So they're indicating that Libby was drugged from the position where she was killed into a new position for the purpose of making it harder to see, not for creating a V pattern with the girls on the ground, and that the sticks were placed on top of her to camouflage her from people being able to see her, even though it covered less or approximately 3% of her body, which is just a couple of twigs laid on top. There's no camouflaging going on, in my opinion, and the appeals position. This, the state argued, caused blood to flow over Libby's chin. So they're claiming the reason why the blood flows the way it does is because when he moved her body, he lifted her head higher than her, or her body higher than her head, causing the blood to flow over her head. And that's where that explanation came from. And for this reason, the state could not, and for reasons the state could not explain, Alan decided to dress Abby in Libby's clothes and turned and repositioned her at the scene, causing blood to flow from her neck over her chin. That part they didn't even bother to explain. They're like, hey, look, he moved the other girl to make her harder to see and put some twigs on top of her. That's why the blood flows from high up over her face, as if she had been moved into position to bleed onto her own face. Then he decided to take time to strip off all her clothes and put it on the other girl and articulate her in a position where she bleeds out over her own face, perhaps upside down or whatever the case may be. But they have no explanation for why that happened or how that all happens in the time frame that they say it did. Although the girls' injuries were different and possibly caused by multiple weapons or different mechanisms altogether, the state's pathologist speculated that a single blade, such as a box cutter, caused all the injuries, including the scallop mark. So they did have an expert come on and try to say that the scallop mark is an indication of a second weapon or a different type of weapon, but it could have been caused by a box cutter, and that's what they went with. Single weapon, box cutter. Even if a scallop mark would indicate a different type of weapon, it's possible that box cutter could have done it. So therefore, it's one weapon, it's a box cutter, and that's what we're going with. The blood stain on the tree, according to the state, was an inverted L transfer from Libby's arm as she propped herself against the tree. So she propped up against the tree like this, held onto the tree, and that's what caused that L shape on the tree. And female hair and multiple incomplete profiles were scene contamination or background DNA from the girls sharing their clothes or through incidental contact with people that they knew. So in other words, if any DNA other than the girls are found at that crime scene, the state argues, it's incidental contact that they had with other people that they were engaged with on their own free will earlier in the day. Anything you find at that crime scene will be other people that the girls engaged with willingly Anything else is going to be Alan. Oh, guess what? We didn't find any of Alan's DNA. Well, that's a bummer. It's there somewhere, but we didn't find it. But anything else you see of any other individuals, that's people that girls would have apparently engaged with earlier in the day. It's not Alan because we've decided Richard Allen is the guy. According to the state, it could not find Alan's DNA because the blood from Abby and Libby was overwhelming the scene and competing with any DNA that Alan would have left behind. So because the girls bled so profusely, Alan's DNA is there. We assure you, it's just been covered up by the girls. But by the way, if you find anybody's DNA at the scene other than Alan's or the girls, that's because they bumped into somebody somewhere else. And that's the story that you're going to be told. At trial, the jury heard about the state's investigation from the day the girls went missing to a few days later when Alan met with Dullen. The state then told the jury to fast forward 5.5 years to a volunteer finding Dullen's report in September 2022. So Dullen apparently was a detective that had taken a statement from Richard Allen early on. Days after the girls went missing from the day. So from the day the girls went missing, when they were asking the public if anybody had seen girls out there, and he came forward voluntarily. Yeah, I saw some girls that day. Came forward voluntarily, and they took a statement and they cleared him. Dullen cleared him. Fast forward 5.5 years, when a volunteer finds Dullen's report talking to Richard Allen in September. The jury heard nothing, maybe very little, regarding, and so I guess what they're saying with the addition of maybe very little, they heard nothing or they heard very, very little regarding the manner, quality, and thoroughness of the investigation between the murders in February 2017 and Allen's arrest in 2022, 5.5 years later. They heard very little, if anything. On November 11th, 2024, following a 25-day trial, the jury found Allen guilty of 2 counts of murder. Allen appealed. Below is the evidence the defense was prohibited from offering to the jury. So below, this is the good shit. Below is the evidence the defense was prohibited from offering to the jury. They were never allowed. The judge did not allow them to tell the jury the following information. Point B, the bridge guy. What the jury did not hear. The jury never saw the sketch below, which is the man that a person named Blair saw on the bridge when Abby and Libby were approaching. The sketch does not look like Allen, who in February of 2016 was short, 44 years old, with closely cropped hair. So this is a young 20-year-old with bushy brown hair that was repeatedly described that way. And that sketch was given after the police, a sketch artist, sketched it. The person who was giving the description of who they saw that day said, yeah, that's a 10 out of 10. That's exactly what I saw. That's the guy I saw. It looks nothing like Richard Allen, and the jury was not allowed to see that. In 2017, Blair rated that sketch 10 out of 10 for accuracy. In 2019, a couple years later, she reaffirmed her confidence in the sketch and insisted that she could identify the bridge guy if she saw him again. So 2 years later, she still says, yeah, that's the guy I saw. That's still accurate to what I said. Nor did the jury hear, however, that Blair and at one point the Indiana State Police believed that the man she saw, bridge guy, was not the man that Carbaugh, another eyewitness, saw that was muddy and bloody. Now, we talked about in the previous thing, the original person said, Carbaugh said, I saw a guy in a tan jacket that was muddy. That's all she said. Later on, the state added that he was muddy and bloody and that his jacket was blue. And she changed her testimony. So originally she saw a guy in a tan jacket with mud on it. Later, the state needed it to be a blue jacket. So she said, oh, it was a blue jacket and he was muddy and had blood on it. That was allowed to happen to the jury. They were not allowed to know that she changed her testimony. That originally it was a tan jacket with mud and it became a blue jacket with mud and blood. You should be furious. I'm furious. The bullet. The jury never heard, excuse me, the jury never heard that the firearm and Toolmark evidence is flawed and unscientific. So they used Toolmark evidence about an unspent, unfired .40 caliber bullet found next to one of the girls. It was unspent. It wasn't used in the commission of the crime. The girls were not shot, even though Richard Allen at one point during his confession would say that he shot the girls, something that did not happen and should have raised questions to the jury about whether he's confessing to the right crime. Are you sure you did the crime? Because the girls weren't shot and you just said you shot them. It doesn't matter. You know what we'll do? We'll ignore. We won't let the jury hear that he admitted to shooting the girls. Fuck. The jury never heard that the firearm and toolmark evidence is flawed and unscientific. Allen proffered expert witness William Tobin to explain the scientific community's criticism of the AFT methodology. We talked about this in part one to a great extent. Tobin is nationally recognized as a forensic metallurgist. He has extensive experience in metallurgy, bullet and lead analysis, and toolmark principles, along with a background in statistics. He is familiar with the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, or PCAST, which has criticized the AFTE methodology of toolmark identification. The person who claims that bullet belongs to Richard Allen and his gun used the AFTE methodology, and other experts say you can't rely on AFTE methodology. It's not a good test, but that's what they used. Tobin reviewed Oberg. Oberg was the person that used the AFTE methodology, which has flaws. Tobin, an expert, reviewed Oberg's work and was prepared to explain the flaws of the AFTE methodology. He has testified, this person who's an expert in metallurgy, has testified in over 297 cases, and he has been recognized by state high courts as an expert on the topic. But he doesn't get to testify in that case and tell the jury the conflicting information. This sounds so much like the Brian Koberger Idaho for Murders, where Cy Ray, the literal expert in timing advance records, is not allowed to testify and tell you that the timing advance records on Koberger do not show what the state said it shows. But he was not allowed to talk about it either. Experts in cases by judges aren't allowed to talk if it doesn't support the prosecution's narrative, because that's the way we do shit in America. The jury never heard Allen's confused, disjointed ramblings and screams during the months that Dr. Wallace said Allen was making logical and organized confessions. Yes, the jury got to hear some of Richard Allen's very clear and organized, logical confessions. I killed those girls. What they didn't get to hear is all of the shit that happened before and after saying I killed those girls. Oftentimes it happened the same day he said he killed those girls, which were disjointed ramblings and screams and all kinds of psychotic behavior because he was having a psychotic break in prison. The trial court permitted Allen to play 15 videos of him in solitary to impeach his confessions. So the court did permit Allen, his defense team, to play 15 videos of him in solitary confinement to help impeach his confession. In other words, the defense was allowed to show, look, our client has mental problems. He's got a psychotic break, and they were allowed to show the jury some of that footage, 15 videos. However, it says, but the judge required Allen to mute the audio. So that they were allowed to show videos, but they weren't allowed to let the jury hear what Richard Allen is saying on those videos. So they could see pictures and form their own conclusion what's going on in the video, but they were not allowed to hear Richard Allen's voice himself because the judge would not allow the jury to hear anything that might, this is the way I'm going to word it, the judge would not allow the jury to hear anything that might make them think that Allen was fucking batshit crazy. So he didn't allow the jury to hear it. Now they'll try to argue, well, he presented videos to show that he was out of his mind. But what they're not telling you is that they didn't allow the jury to hear it. They only allowed them to see some things. In video 922 or 972, in video 972. So we're going to break down some of the things that were on those videos, which I felt enough worthy to comment by reading it to you. In video 972, guards extracted a skinny, white-eyed Allen with blood on his forehead. Allen screamed for his dad and asked guards to hold his hands and yelled, "Roger, Marvin, wait for it." Now, what they're telling you is these are the audio portions that were excluded. The jury did not get to hear the audio. What you would hear in the audio, if the jury had been allowed to hear it, was him screaming for his dad, calling for Roger and Marvin, and saying, "Wait for it," along with his actions. All would have led to somebody to think something's weird with his behavior. They also did not hear this, video 980, which they saw but did not hear. April 13, guards ordered Alan to cuff up, naked and confused. He clutched the sink and shook. When officers entered, Alan begged to be put on an airplane and told them not to believe his last confession. That was not allowed to be heard by the jury. The jury was not allowed to hear that he asked them not to believe his confession. The jury was not allowed to hear that. They got to see video of him standing by a sink. Oh, we let you show that video, but you didn't get to hear him say, don't believe my last confession. Video 1002. While being transported to see Dr. Walla, another inmate yelled, "Kill yourself, Richard Allen." The jury was not allowed to hear that as well. Richard Allen is being taunted by other inmates to kill himself. He's being threatened. He's being intimidated. He's being mocked in prison. It all leads to the mental breakdown that he had, but they were not allowed to hear that people were shouting for him to kill himself. Video 107, or 1007, sorry. April 17. During transport for a forced injection of Haldol. They were injecting him with Haldol to try to make him a little less crazy because he was losing his shit. So they thought they would just drug him into consciousness so he can give a confession that looked good on camera. We got to drug you up and give you something to make this psychosis go away so you can look good confessing on camera. Alan screamed, spoke incoherently, asked for his mommy and daddy. He's a fucking 50-something-year-old guy at this point, and he's asking for mommy and daddy. Rambling about suicide and time travel, and within 7 minutes claimed to both be the stupidest and smartest person ever. Repeated, "Wait for it," for no fucking reason. Wait for it. Wait for it. A guard told him that the games are over and commented on the feces that was on him. He had rubbed himself in his own feces. Alan responded tangentially, "Rocky Balboa is my favorite actor." And clap on, clap off. What is that showing? It's showing Richard Allen is fucking completely batshit off of his rocker. He's randomly saying shit. He's randomly calling for mommy and daddy. He's randomly saying weird shit that have no context whatsoever. They're talking about how he has poop on him. And he's like, "Hey, Rocky Balboa is my favorite actor." What does that have to do? First of all, Rocky Balboa is not an actor. It's a character in a movie. But the point being is that completely incoherent ramblings. But guess what? The jury was not allowed to hear it. They got to see some video footage of which there's no context because there's no audio. This is what I understand. Video 1026 from April 21st. During a haircut, Alan mostly stared into space, confused, and he responded, "Leave the top," when asked if he wanted his face shaved. "You want your face shaved? Just leave the top." The hell does that mean? It's a sign that you're not thinking clearly, but the jury's not allowed to hear that as well. Video 1152, April 28th. There might be a typo on there. No other number on the videos is that long, so I'm wondering if that's a typo. During a shower transport, Alan spoke incoherently, repeatedly saying, "There is a God. Please don't do this," and make it painless. With feces on his face, he asked to be euthanized and whether his wife was present. He said he was King Michael, claimed that he had started World War III, tried to save his family and Donald Trump, sang hymns, quoted scripture, and asked to be cryogenically frozen. All of which might lead a jury to think that he's a little batshit crazy and maybe off of his rocker, but the jury was not allowed to hear any of that. They get to see a video without sound, so they couldn't hear it, is what I understand. Video 1201 on June 20th. Guards carried a catatonic, drooling Alan to the infirmary. The medical professionals discussed with Alan his cholesterol and blood pressure rather than his non-responsiveness and involuntary jerking that he was doing. Alan stared blankly when asked the date or the season. He couldn't respond. Those questions and things that were going on in that conversation were muted, and the jury did not hear it. Alan asked this court to watch the videos with the sound, especially certain pieces. Also, the jury did not hear Alan the morning that he started confessing tell his family in 3 intertwined calls that he was confused and losing his mind. So Alan had asked the court, you need to hear these with sound in order to get the context of what's going on. Now, Alan doesn't probably ask himself. It's Alan's defense team. So his defense team on behalf of Alan is asking, let us play the sound, which they're not. The jury did not hear also Alan the morning that he started confessing, the morning he started confessing, tell his family on 3 intertwined calls that he was confused and losing his mind. The jury was not allowed to hear, hey, I'm really confused and I'm losing my mind. I think they're breaking me. All those kind of comments were not allowed to be told to the jury. All that was being allowed to be told to the jury is the times during that day that he said, I killed those girls, or at least I think I did. Things like that were showed to the jury, but not him saying, I'm really confused and I'm losing my mind. In the first call at 3:12 a.m. on April 3rd, Alan told his dad he was losing his mind and was uncertain how much longer he was going to be lucid. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be of sound mind. I'm losing my mind. I don't know how much longer I'm going to last. That's what he tells him when he's confessing. Alan said, you guys know I would never do something like I've been accused of. So on the day that he's giving confessions, he's also saying, I couldn't have done this. Alan felt he had been mentally tortured like he's in Guantanamo Bay and that there were drugs in his coffee and Kool-Aid. Now, one could argue, is that delusions? Take it one way or another. You're saying he's delusional because he's thinking that people are drugging his coffee. And if he's delusional, then he's got mental problems, and you have a problem if you want to convict him because he's got mental problems. He's delusional. Nobody's drugging his coffee or Kool-Aid. Or they really are drugging his coffee and Kool-Aid, and then he's not delusional, and you got another fucking problem. Either way you break this down, you've got a problem with him stating you're drugging my coffee. He's either delusional or it is true, one or the other, and both of them are problems. In the call the jury heard at 5:14 in the morning, Alan told his wife for the first time he thinks that he killed Abby and Libby and, quote, evidently I did it. Evidentially I did it, right? So let's get this straight. In the morning at 3:12, he's saying he's not sure he's doing it. He doesn't know how long he's going to be lucid. He would never do something like it. A couple hours later, he's on a phone call with his wife and he says, yeah, I did it. I killed those girls. Evidentially I did it. He just said that same day he didn't do it. That part won't be shown to the jury. The I did it part will be shown to the jury. Then in a third call at 8:45 a.m., a panicked Alan told his wife he was not sure of his original call to her if it was a dream. He said he was not drinking the water or the coffee and questioned whether the attorneys who were coming to visit him were actually his attorneys. So sandwiched between the I wouldn't do something like this, and I don't know that I'm losing my mind and I might not be lucid, and I'm panicked and I'm not sure that I even confessed to you because I think that might have been a dream. In between that is a confession where he says, I killed those girls. Evidently, I did it. That's what got shown to the jury. The jury only heard the second call with that confession, along with Trooper Harshman's opinion that Alan showed no indication that he was under duress or stress when he made that admission. So he's losing his shit before, he's losing his shit after, but for some moment, right in the middle, when they got him on phone saying he did it, evidentially, that was a perfectly lucid moment and no signs that he was having any problems understanding truth from reality or, fiction from reality, whatever you want to say. He had no problems during that brief second between two crazy calls. He was totally lucid. That's the one the jury will hear. That's what everyone will be told. He was perfectly fine that day when he made that confession. The detail only the killer would know. The jury never heard that Alan could not have walked the girls across the creek to kill them after seeing a van driving down a lane as he confessed. We talked about this earlier. Now we're going to get into the details a bit. The state had video showing Weber's van arriving home 25 minutes after the pause in movement of Libby's phone and nearly 15 minutes after it stopped moving altogether. So what they're saying is that van didn't go by at the time they said it did. It went by after the girls had already been deceased. So therefore, Richard Allen did not see the van and panic and then kill them. Specifically, security camera footage from Weber's neighbors showed him arriving. Security camera footage shows Weber arriving home at 2:44, not at like 2:25, like he told them, which would align with the state's timing and Richard Allen's confession that he saw the white van. That is not when he actually got home. They have footage proving that he didn't get home when he originally said he got home, and therefore the white van did not go by at the time that they said. And again, those of you who've been watching this case for a long time are probably more aware, and I might have something slightly wrong, so please correct me in a gentle manner. I'm just coming up to speed, but what I'm reading right here is the van didn't go by when Alan said that he saw the van, and it was probably something that was planted in his mind. The state also had a report prepared by the FBI, which confirmed that Weber's cell phone arrived at his home at 2:50 p.m., not 2:25 as he said. So again, Weber arrived home much later than he said. Therefore, the white van that Alan supposedly saw and panicked and killed the girls because he saw the white van didn't happen when he said it happened. The jury also never heard that Alan confessed to details that the real killer would know were wrong, including that Alan said he shot the girls. Alan confessed that he killed the girls and he shot them. The girls were not shot. But the jury was not allowed to hear that Richard Allen's confession included, I shot the girls and then I cut them up with a knife. They weren't allowed to hear the I shot them part because it didn't happen. So the way you deal with that is you just don't let the jury know that he confessed to shooting them, because they might go, are you sure you're confessing to something you did? Because you just said you shot them and they weren't shot, so maybe you didn't do it. They don't want that in the jury's head, so we just won't mention that he mentioned he shot them. The judge prohibited Alan's expert, Dr. Grazian, from identifying Alan's signs of being in a state of delirium and hallmarks of a false memory. So look, they have an expert. The defense has an expert that says, look, Richard Allen is remembering things incorrectly, like shooting them or seeing a van. These are false memories implanted in him by prosecutors and law enforcement and maybe prison guards to make him remember details that didn't happen. And in his psychotic state that they broke him in, he starts remembering the crime differently than it happened. And then he gives you the confession on the stand, which has something right and something wrong, and you only show the jury the parts that make it right and not the parts that make it wrong. One such hallmark of these false memories is the facts that Alan got wrong. But the jury didn't get to hear that. And now Alan's alternative exculpatory explanation of the scene. And this gets crazy. This gets super crazy. I'm going to turn the heat off because it's getting hotter than a pistol in here. All right. The jury never heard that from the beginning. This is crazy. I never knew this had the teeth that it did. The jury never heard that from the beginning. Many investigators, not crackpots, not crazy YouTubers, not insane batshit people who fucking live in their mom's basement, from investigators. Investigators believed and investigated the girls' murders as part of a Norse pagan ritual, and that the unusual and complex scene had textbook features of such. Stop, full fucking stop. When I first heard the pagan ritual and the Odinist people, the people who worship Odin and whatever, I thought to myself, it almost never is that. It's here we go again. People are going to just grasp any kind of crazy theory. I even myself made the mistake of blowing it off too quickly, because oftentimes the satanic panic effect, right? Christians in a very conservative area often will be like, look for any sign that it was a bunch of Satanists doing it. And so I just automatically start tuning out. Oh, here we go with the Satanist again. It's always Satanist, right? Because only Satanists do bad crimes. And so therefore it has to be Satanist. But I did not pay attention. I did not pay attention clearly. Investigators, FBI were taking seriously in the early stages that this was a ritual, Norse pagan ritual with textbook pagan signs of a ritual. Continuing on, there was always a discussion among law enforcement that this may be a ritual murder and that the sticks were Nordic runes. That has always been a discussion. I didn't know this. I thought the whole idea, oh, hey, did you hear that the bodies were positioned in a V shape in a Nordic ritual and that sticks were placed on there for runes? I thought you guys were grasping at straws. I'm ashamed of myself. I should be better than that. I will tell you this. I did question Richard Allen's confession. I said, look, that guy does not look like he's guilty. I've watched so many videos where he said, I didn't do this. I begged. I didn't do this. Why do they keep saying I do this? I don't know why I've seen so many where like, that guy looks genuine. I don't think he did it. I thought that. But when you started to do the whole Norse god thing and Odin worshipers and Odin prison guards who were watching over him with patches to Odin, the god Odin and this Nordic cult, I thought that didn't happen. It actually did. Good Lord. Way more than I expected. There was always a discussion among law enforcement that this may be a ritual murder and that the sticks were Nordic runes. Also, many officers believed the scene was too complex for one person to be involved. And yet, when Richard Allen was identified after 5.5 years, they made it into a simple case of a guy that just wants to rape a couple of girls that he sees on a train track one day because it's opportunistic, and then freaks out, kills them, and leaves the scene, and turn it into that instead of what they originally thought for a long time. Within the first week, the Carroll County Sheriff enlisted the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit to evaluate whether the sticks related to pagan rituals. The fucking FBI was brought in to investigate whether it was a pagan ritual. I had no idea it had gone to that level. I thought, in my shameful admission, I'm shamefully admitting, I thought when I first heard the ritual thing, I found it interesting, but I was like, it's probably going to be a know-nothing burger at the end of the day, because usually it is when it's a ritual. But the FBI was brought in, and furthermore, the FBI took that shit seriously. After examining the evidence, the BAU declined to exclude a pagan ritual as a plausible explanation for the murder. So the FBI is brought in to analyze the possibility it was a pagan ritual, and they would not exclude it as being a possible pagan ritual. It remains possible, was the quote, a new believer or rogue believer in Odinism was involved in the case. That was an expert opinion, I think, from the FBI. Now, why are they bringing this in and why it's important? What they're saying is it's not textbook necessarily. It's not textbook pagan ritual. Something is a little off about it, but they're not excluding the possibility that it's a new believer or a rogue believer who has their own kind of interpretation of the symbols, and therefore it's not textbook, but close enough that you can tell somebody is involved in that whole Odin cult pagan ritual shit. They just are doing it a little different way, or they're brand new to it and they got a little piece wrong, which of course the people who are going to convict Richard Allen will say the fact that there's anything slightly off about it proves it wasn't a ritual at all. It was proven. But the FBI is saying we can't say that it's not somebody who's just kind of new to the religion and kind of messed something up a little bit. A Purdue professor also consulted law enforcement on whether the sticks were runically inspired, runes, Nordic runes. He found it quite plausible that these markings constitute an instruction inspired by Norse runes or modern recreations thereof. Again, if you look at old runes, some people do modern takes on those runes, and it's slightly different. So one might say, if they're trying to ignore the idea that it could be a runic or a Nordic thing, well, hey, this doesn't match the old god style of runes, so see, it can't be. But there's a modern interpretation of the runes. See what I'm saying? Like you see what you want to see. Law enforcement consulted with an undercover Indiana State Patrol trooper regarding the sticks and the blood stain on the tree. The officer was familiar, that officer they talked to and consulted was familiar with Norse pagan symbols through his covert intelligence. In other words, the Norse religion, Odin kind of cult shit is so big that officers have intelligence people who are involved in looking into it because it's happened before. They got enough people in it. They know enough about the Odin cult that they've got people who work on that and look for those kind of things. That's why I didn't take it seriously. I didn't realize it was such a big thing there. He agreed, this officer, that the blood on the tree resembled the pagan Fehu rune. I probably pronounced it wrong. And he found similarities between the sticks formations on the girls and pagan bind runes. So he did find, being an expert in intelligence on this particular Odinism pagan ritual, he saw the Fehu rune on the tree and similarities in the way that the sticks were formed in the girls that look like binding runes from people who believe in paganism and the Nordic pagan rituals. Once Allen was charged with the murders, however, the defense team consulted a nationally recognized expert, Don Parameter, who found 7 features of a Norse pagan ritual, and they include. So listen, Richard Allen's defense team also said, I don't think this was Richard Allen. This was somebody into this Nordic pagan shit, and they brought in somebody who found 7 distinct features that they believe indicate it was a pagan ritual, a Norse pagan ritual. Location. She explained that Norse pagans follow a Norse pantheon of gods like Thor and Odin. They have nature-based ideology where events and rituals are conducted outdoors in wooded areas near water. The murders occurred outdoors in a clearing near a creek. So location was consistent with the Nordic thing. You might think that's slight and sketchy, but here's a better one. Date. Norse pagan rituals often occur on Nordic holidays or events. The Nordic holiday Villisblot, which I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, Villisblot, which honors Odin's son Vali, begins at sundown on February 13th and continues until February 14th. The girls went missing at sundown on the 13th and were found dead the following day. Holy shit. In paganism, many times the day begins at sundown and goes to sundown the next day. Therefore, the 13th of February, starting at sundown through the 14th at sundown, is a pagan holiday. The girls went missing at sundown on the 13th when the pagan holiday would start and were found the next day during the pagan holiday. The means that were used. Ritual killings often involve a knife or a ceremonial knife. And here the girls were killed with a knife that made an unusual scalloped mark, a curved blade, often used in ritual killings. That's what they, but again, an expert for the prosecution came in and said the scalloped blade mark was probably something that could have been made by a box cutter. Therefore, it is a box cutter because they want to rule out the possibility that a ritualistic knife was used in the killing. Sticks. Ritualistic crimes usually involve symbolism at the scene, and with Norse pagan, the symbolism would include arranging natural objects in a specific way, like sticks and runes, and blooding the runes. These practices are integral to the magical thinking involved in Norse pagan rituals. So what does that mean? You place sticks in a certain way to make a rune, and you bleed the victims onto the runes to give them more power if you're into that ritual kind of thing. Here, in the crime, the stick arrangement showed intentional symbolism. It is difficult, this is what the expert concluded in pagan rituals. The stick arrangement showed intentional symbolism. It is difficult to explain the sticks as hiding the bodies. There was absolutely, they're absolutely not working that way. They're not functioning that way. So the expert's saying bullshit that the sticks were placed on top of the girls to hide the bodies. Bullshit. More likely is those sticks were placed in such a way to look like a rune, and blood was letted on those runes to give them power. The stick arrangement on Abby mirrored the Norse rune Gebo, and the intentionally placed stick formations on Libby looked like a Nordic binding rune. Manner of death. Ritual sacrifices often involve blood loss and torture. The girls' throats were cut and they suffered prolonged blood loss, which is indicative of a sacrificial offering or initiation type activity. And the body arrangement. In rituals, the sacrifice will be displayed or arranged at the scene in a manner that is significant to the group. And an upside down hanging body is an important element of Norse paganism because Odin hung on a tree for 9 days before discovering runes. Like Abby's positioning, the classic image of Odin depicts him with one leg bent behind the other. And this is the way one of the bodies was positioned. This is page 50. I'll show you again, maybe. I was hoping to do it quickly, but I didn't realize how far we've come. I was going to show you the sketch. Fudge! There it is. See how this leg is bent behind the other and clothed? They're indicating that staging of the body with the foot bent behind the other was done to represent Odin's famous depiction. And again, the claim is that a Odinist Norse group probably staged this scene because it was significant to them in the way that they staged it. Sorry, it took so long to get back there. Unusual blood pattern. Finally, so these are the 7 points that this person said shows indication it could have been a ritual killing. A ritual sacrifice would involve an atypical or symbolic blood pattern. And here the blood pattern on the F tree appeared to look like a Nordic pagan Fehu rune. So the expert in Nordic pagan rituals says there's a lot of signs, 7, that I can see that would make one believe that maybe it was a pagan ritual. Most notably, perhaps from my point, that it happened actually on a pagan holiday, a Nordic pagan holiday, starting at sundown on the 13th, just like their holiday would start. Now, the manner, thoroughness, and quality of the investigation. We're going to continue with that. We're going to wrap up pretty soon here. We're at an hour right now. Usually don't want to go more than an hour and a half. The manner, thoroughness, and quality of the investigation. The jury never heard how law enforcement bungled the investigation into the ritual killing or suspects connected to Norse paganism. Indiana State Police disregarded Brad Holder. This is important. Listen to this shit carefully. Indiana State Police disregarded Brad Holder, the father of Abby's boyfriend and Holder's friend, Patrick Westfall. So two individuals they're looking at that they disregarded was Brad Holder, the father of Abby's boyfriend, and his friend, Patrick Westfall, who are members of the Odinist clan and have all kinds of red flags. They're members of the Odinist thing. So one of the father's sons is dating this girl, one of the girls. And he's an Odinist. He's into this pagan ritual shit, including shocking details. Like he actually said he wanted to do human sacrifices. They disregarded all of that, those guys, all of that shit. They disregarded that and went after the 55-year-old man, 44-year-old man at the time, went after that guy instead. So they disregarded those Brad Holder and Holder's friend Patrick Westfall as promising alternative suspects because they lost evidence. They'd lost evidence, mishandled the original interviews, and conducted a poor investigation. So they fucked it up in the early stages of the investigation. They had it right in their hands. They had it right in their hands in the early parts of the investigation. About 5.5 years goes by. They fucked up the investigation. They fucked up their leads they had. They had it right in their hands, and they fucked it up. And when they went back 5.5 years later, they found a new way to go after somebody, and they went after Richard Allen and ignored all the previous shit they had right in their hands from day one. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the investigation into the ritual killing, and we're going to end there probably today. After examining the scene, several officers believed the scene was too complex for one person to be involved. Right away, after examining the scene, officers thought one person didn't do this. Then the BAU, and this is, I think, the FBI specialists that were brought in, the BAU evaluated the murder scene, and it found it noteworthy that Abby was clothed. Allowing Abby to dress ahead of time suggests that the suspect felt differently towards her, including a possibility of heightened level of guilt or regret, at least compared to Libby. Law enforcement explored a group of pagans connected to Abby. So listen, they felt there was something weird about the fact that one of the girls was dressed and one was not, suggesting that maybe Abby knew somebody or knew the killer or whatever. And so they started looking into Abby, who had a boyfriend whose dad was into paganism, and the cult that they were going to, but they dropped the fucking ball. They dropped the ball on this. In the weeks leading to the murders, Abby had been talking with a boy. We're going to call him LH. We know that the father's name is Holden, so I'm assuming the boy's name is something Holden, L. Holden. You guys who follow this case know exactly who it is. I'm certain by now that's long out on the wind and everybody knows it. I'm late to the case, so all I know is that LH is probably Brad Holden's son who was dating Abby. So in the weeks leading up to the murders, Abby had been talking with a boy, LH, and meeting up with him a few times. She kept this relationship secret from her family. She didn't want her family to know she was dating this boy. On the day that she was murdered, Abby invited Holden's son, I'm betting, to meet her on the trail. Libby had school. LH, not Libby. This boy had school. Remember, the girls didn't have school that day, but the boy that she texted to say, meet me on the trails, did have school, so he declined to go. While law enforcement was searching for the girls on February the 14th, they learned about this relationship between LH and Abby's secret relationship and pulled that kid out of class in Logansport and searched his phone. That moment, that boy texted his father, Brad Holder, saying, she's missing. Listen. This boy who knows Abby and Libby, but at least Abby for sure, texts his dad after they come and pull him out of school, tells his dad, hey, they're looking for Abby. But this boy's dad is into this pagan ritual that they dropped the ball on. This is the way I understand it. If you guys think I'll tell you what, I'm going to be fucking pissed if I'm completely wrong about how I'm reading this, but this is how I'm reading this. Lost and missing interviews. On February 17th, so the murders I think happened on the 14th, yes. On February 17th, days afterwards, law enforcement interviewed both that boy and Holder. Funny they abbreviate LH, like we're not supposed to guess that it's Holder, and his dad, Brad Holder. So on February 17th, days afterwards, they interviewed both the son and the father, is what I'm going to interpret that to mean. I could be wrong, but that's what it looks like. They're going to interview the boy that was dating one of the girls and his father. By then, law enforcement already suspected the murder scene involved a pagan ritual. So they're coming to people with known association with paganism, and they suspect it's a pagan murder. During the interview, Holder, that's the dad, because they don't call him Holder if he's the son, they call him LH. During the interview, Holder reported being involved in a pagan tribe. He actually said, I'm involved in a pagan tribe. And he spends every weekend in Delphi engaging in pagan rituals with his friend Westfall and 5 or 6 others, including women. Remember, a hair of a female was found at the scene. And they're like, if there's any hair there of anybody other than Richard Allen, it must be somebody they incidentally came in contact. Maybe not one of these group of pagan ritual motherfuckers who have women in their pagan ritual tribe and go out and do pagan rituals along with them and their friends. Happen to be dating one of the girls that's in the sacrifice. I mean, the crime scene. These rituals involved animal sacrifices and human bloodletting. Listen, this appears to be actually documented that Holder, the father of this child, admitted they were in a pagan tribe and did pagan rituals that included animal sacrifice and human bloodletting. That's admitted to. But they were ruled out, cleared, bungled the investigation, waited 5.5 years and went after some guy as some horny old man who saw a couple of girls that he could do something with and buried him with 2 sticks. Holder admitted knowing about Abby and Libby's Abby and her son and his son's relationship, but he denied ever having met her. So Holder admitted he knew about Abby and his son's relationship, but denied having ever met her until later when he'll admit, okay, maybe I did meet her once. Okay, maybe I met her more than once. Okay, maybe I fucking knew who Abby was. All right. Law enforcement recorded Holder's interview, but the Delphi police recorded over their only copy before August of 2017, permanently deleting it. Only a one-page narrative remains. So in their fucking documentation, they've got a one-page narrative talking about the interview they had with this guy, but the actual words that were said and recorded have been recorded over. Isn't that convenient? Now, this was before they identified Richard Allen. So it's not like they retroactively said, let's wipe out all evidence relating to anyone else. But it does seem that somebody may have really fucked up accidentally deleting a key piece of evidence. Or somebody decided we're not looking into the paganism thing, so we're just going to go ahead and delete that. And we'll wait until we get a better lead, even if it takes 5.5 years to get a better lead, because we're just not going down the pagan route. That's more likely what I think happened. Somebody intentionally deleted or recorded over the recording because they decided we're not going to go down this whole, we're not going to go down the pagan ritual lead. We're going to look for something else. So let's just delete this talk. Let's delete this fucking shit talking about the pagan ritual thing because we're not going to go there. We'll wait even if it fucking takes 5 years to find somebody else other than somebody involved with the pagan ritual community. According to that narrative, Holder, this guy told police he owned a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson, but law enforcement never collected his gun, nor did they collect his cell phone. Holy piss balls. One of the girls in the killings had a .40 caliber bullet next to her body, unfired next to her body. Holder, who was in a pagan ritual, who liked to go out into the woods and do pagan rituals, including animal sacrifices and bloodletting, whose recording of that conversation gets written and wiped over, has a .40 caliber gun that they never decided to look at. We're not going to compare whether his gun matches the bullet found at the crime scene. We've already ruled him out. On February 19th, 2017, law enforcement interviewed Westfall, his friend, I believe, and they failed to record that interview as well. They failed to record that interview with his friend, even though they're suspecting these guys are in a pagan ritual clan together and could have been suspects. They failed to record the interview, and only a 5-paragraph narrative remains. That narrative, therefore, does remain. I have half a mind to go after the public records on these right now. right now. Now, the problem is now it's kind of an ongoing investigation again because it's being appealed. According to his narrative, Westfall knew, listen, this is huge. According to his narrative, Westfall, the friend, knew the woods where the girls were murdered very well. He reported knowing the girls themselves, but denied ever meeting them. So he knows who they are, but he never met them, he said. He also reported being a religious leader for local pagans, and he wore a necklace to the interview representing his efforts to pledge to the Vinlanders, a pagan social club. There is no indication law enforcement asked Westfall whether he owned a .40 caliber firearm. Westfall's phone was not searched at the time. So this guy comes in and tells you he's a local pagan leader. He's got a pagan symbol on his neck when he comes to the interview. They believe that paganism is involved in the killings, and they just somehow lose and don't record that interview and record over the other pagan guys. Like, what the fuck's going on in this group? What the fuck's going on? Are you kidding me? Why are we so fucking incompetent? Why? Alibi investigation. We'll wrap up here shortly. Alibi investigation. When asked for an alibi, Westfall claimed he was home with his minor son. Westfall claimed he was home with his minor son. And so that was his alibi. I was home with my son. And Holder told officers he was at work at Liberty Landfill. There's problems with these alibis. So we're going to get into that. So these guys who look, I mean, on surface, man, early on, they thought it was a pagan ritual. FBI even said it was a pagan ritual. Everybody thought it was a pagan ritual. They found a couple of guys who admitted that they're in a pagan group and they like to sacrifice animals, go out into the woods. They know the woods very well. They know the girls. They have .40 caliber handguns, but they just get dismissed. And 5.5 years later, they go after Richard Allen, put him in prison, break him psychologically and mentally, give him psychosis, and then have him say, yeah, I guess I did it after all this time. And they give him 130 years. On April 13th, 2017, officers visited the landfill to investigate and spoke with an employee. So they're going to check Holder's alibi out. They did go that far. They went to the landfill where he said he was working that day. So on April 13th, officers visited the landfill to investigate and spoke with an employee, Susan Case, who provided a printout showing Holder swiped out of work at 2:45 p.m., which would mean, allegedly, that he couldn't have done the murders because he was still at work that day until 2:45 p.m. Remember, the murders happened somewhere around that time, so he would have still been at work, which was 30 minutes after the bridge guy video. So it was, again, the bridge guy video, that murders, they say happened a half hour before that. He was still at work, therefore his alibi checks out. Case invited the officers to review the video to confirm the printout's accuracy, but they declined. The police didn't even want to look into it. Hey, yeah, he checked out at 2:45. You want to see it? Nah, we don't want to see it. We trust you. Nor did they interview other employees. Unified Command marked Holder as cleared as a suspect. Tipsters continued to identify Holder as the bridge guy. Tipsters continued to identify Brad Holder, as the bridge guy that you see. But they're like, nah, we don't need to check out his alibi. You told me he was at work. That's good enough. Tipsters repeatedly called and reported Holder as a person of interest. Repeatedly called and mentioned Holder as a person of interest. Holder posts half-dead, listen, this is nuts. Holder posts half-dead women and shows fascination with symbols out of tree branches. Quote, these are quotes from people's tips that they were giving. Look, Holder likes to post pictures of half-dead women and shows a fascination with tree branches. You should check him out. Another person said, check the father of one of the girl's boyfriends. His name is Brad Holder. He also fits somewhat of the description. Each time a tip came in, law enforcement marked it as cleared, nothing further, covered, or alibi was confirmed. He was working that day. We asked. They said he was working that day. So we asked. They said he was working that day. We didn't want to even verify whether he really was working. They said he did. Alibi cleared, not involved. We're not going down the pagan ritual angle. And sometime around March 2017, Detective Purdy interviewed Holder to get his assistance in connecting the murders to Norse paganism. So sometime in March, a detective interviewed Holder, this guy who's in the pagan rituals, to get his assistance in connecting the murders to Norse paganism. Well, isn't that convenient? A prime suspect in the case, who should have been a prime suspect and was cleared, inconceivably cleared, is now going to be asked for his assistant. Hey, can you help us see if this was a Norse killing? Oh, yeah, I'd love to help you with that. Because Holder was not a suspect, Purdy did not record or document the interview with a report. So he literally interviews the guy about, is it possible a group of pagans like yourself did this, and got his assistance in helping find somebody for the case. Unified Command declines to re-interview despite Holder is posting pictures of young girls believed to be deceased with sticks placed over their bodies. And I have to laugh. It's so fucking dumb. In April 12th of 2017, shortly before taking medical leave, Trooper Winters received a call from a tipster, Ryan Boucher, Boucher. I was supposed to Boucher, who shared pictures from Holder's social media platform. So this is like, hey, cops, check out Holder's social media. Winters, this trooper, found a concerning similarity between the murders and pictures posted on Holder's social media. The cops checked it out. Hey, this is weird. Those pictures depicted young girls believed to be dead with sticks placed over their bodies. You can't make that shit up. You cannot make that shit up. People are telling the cops, I think it's this guy, Brad Holder. He's into this kind of shit. He posts pictures of dead women with sticks on top of their bodies on his social media. A cop goes and later checks it out and says, oh yeah, that is weird. He does do that. Huh. You know what? He's been cleared though. Winters also noted a similarity between the stick formations on Abby and the bind rune on Holder himself, tattooed and drew on his hand. Oh my God. He's literally got a tattoo on his hand of a runic bind ritual, because that's what he's into. And it has similarities, according to this trooper, to the way that the sticks were placed on top of one of the bodies. But you know what? We're not interested in this guy. He's been cleared. He was working that day. We asked. When asked about it, Holder said, quote, that's a bind rune on my hand. Basically, I took a Gebo rune and an Isa rune, and I made a bind rune. Literally in the interview recorded and in the documentation, that person admitted that the tattoo on his hand is a binding rune, and he told them what it was, a combination of Geba and Isa runes or whatever, and that is what it is. And the detective apparently said, okay, thanks. Holder's social media also featured him holding guns, homemade knives. Winters immediately recommended to his superiors that law enforcement investigate Holder further. So again, I should clarify. Winters isn't being a dick and completely ignoring it, because Winters actually does say, hey, people should probably look into this guy. So when I was saying that he himself was like, oh, no big deal. It's not he, it's the department. The department seems to think it's no fucking big deal. This detective who's like, hey, this guy's got runic things and he's posting pictures of dead women on his social media with sticks on it. You guys should probably look into it more. That's not the guy who's the problem. It's the department that's looking the other way. Winters was not satisfied. So anyway, So Holder's social media also featured, so Winters, here it was. Winters immediately recommended to his superiors that law enforcement investigate Holder further, because he thinks there's something wrong, which they declined to do, claiming that his alibi had been cleared by the FBI. So again, Winters isn't the problem here. It was them clearing this guy. Winters was not satisfied and urged the Indiana State Police to conduct its own investigation. I don't give a shit if the FBI did clear it or not. You should look into it anyways. But no further action was taken. Let me remind you, good cops don't like bad cops either. In 2018, Holder displayed a painting that he made of Odin upside down with his right leg tucked behind his left, just like Abby's legs were. Holden's painting also featured a red Fehu rune, just like the one on the fucking tree next to the body. So the girl, Abby, is positioned with her leg underneath her body like Odin, something that is literally in Holden's display of paintings. The rune symbol is also in Holder's paintings that is seen on the tree. Officers continue to find other social media postings from Holder that mimicked the crime scene, but law enforcement declined to interview Holder ever again. Eventually, the pagan rituals were reevaluated, and we're going to finish here, I think, because we're well late into this thing, and now maybe there needs to be a part 3, if you're interested. Once the state charged Allen, his defense team insisted that Holder and Westfall receive another look. So once the state charged Allen, his defense team, Allen said, you need to go look at Holder and Westfall because we think they're the better suspect than the guy that you pinned on it. When law enforcement re-examined Holder, so they were kind of forced, okay, fuck, I guess we're going to look into this guy again. When law enforcement re-examined Holder, he changed his story about knowing Abby back in 2017. He told law enforcement he never actually met Abby. But in August of 2023, when he's reinvestigated, he now tells law enforcement that he met Abby once. So before, when they originally investigated him, he said, I never met this girl. Now that they're coming back and reopening the investigation into these guys, they're being forced to by the defense of Richard Allen because they didn't fucking want, I'll tell you this, they never wanted to fucking look into Holder. So they're forced to by the defense team to go back and re-look at it. Okay, well, fuck, we'll go back and look. And now he's changing his story. Okay, maybe I did know the girl. And during the deposition in 2024, he said that he met Abby twice. It keeps changing. Now he knows the girl a lot more than he used to know. Before, he'd never met her. Now he did meet her. And now he's met her twice. At least one of those encounters occurred shortly before Abby's murder at Westfall's home, his friend's home. Oh, did I fail to mention the first time when I said I didn't know her? She'd actually been over to my friend's house. And yeah, I met her a couple times. Did I fail to mention that the first time? At the insistence of Allen's counsel, law enforcement finally examined Westfall's alibi. So they're finally they're like, you need to fucking check this other guy's alibi. He met Abby too, just before the murders. At the insistence of Allen's counsel, law enforcement finally examined Westfall's alibi on August 17th, 2023. Westfall's son, who was a minor when the murders occurred, could not remember if he was home with his dad when the girls went missing. Remember, his alibi is that he was home with his son. So now they ask his son, rechecking this guy's alibi. Hey, earlier your dad told us years ago that when this murder happened, that he was home with you all day long. Were you home with your dad that day? Kid cannot remember if he was home with his dad that day or not. This time, law enforcement collected Westfall's phone, but he deleted the data before turning it over. So did they allow him to delete stuff off his phone before handing them the phone? They don't really give a shit about getting these guys involved. They already have who they want. So I'm imagining that he's like, hey, yeah, I'll give you my phone, but hold on, let me delete some shit real quick. Okay, we'll wait. You're not a suspect. We're only doing this because we're forced to by the fucking defense team of goddamn Richard Allen, who's the murderer of little children. So yeah, take your time. Delete all the things you wanted to delete. That's the way I interpret that. On April 4th, 2024, Allen's counsel deposed. God, I'm not reading carefully. On April 4th, 2024, Allen's counsel deposed Case. That's the person who was verifying that he was at work that day. The Liberty Landfill HR officer, the person that said that he was at work that day. In February of 2017, Liberty Landfill was operating two staggered overlapping shifts, one from 5 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. and a second one from 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. On the day that the girls went missing, Holder was scheduled to work from 5 a.m. to 1:30, so he had that first shift. But his badge swiped out during the second shift around 2:45. Listen, he should have been off work by 1:30, but his badge swiped out at 2:45 p.m. It's as if somebody wants to establish an alibi for him that he was at work that day. His actual shift that he worked, however, was 5 a.m. to 1:30, but his badge was swiped out during the second shift at 2:45 p.m., suggesting he stayed late that day. Holder did not have sole custody of his badge. He's not even the only one who had custody. This badge was on a public rack outside of view of cameras, and accessible to other employees, including the second shift. There was no lock on the badges, and Holder's name was prominent on his badge. If somebody left when they were supposed to, but somebody else clocked that person out an hour or so later, would that be known? They asked during the interrogation. No. What are they saying? If he worked the morning shift that day and therefore was perfectly available to commit the murders during the time that they said, but then later on someone says, hey, we think you might have committed the murders, and you say, no, I was actually at work until 2:45, could he have called somebody at work and said, hey, can you swipe my badge out at 2:45 to show that I'm still there? Sure, no problem. Could that have happened? Yes. There's no cameras on the badges. Anybody could have swiped that card for him if he needed to establish an alibi. So he was off by 1:30, we believe, but somebody may have swiped his badge at 2:45 when he needed to have an alibi for the time that he was at the murder scene. That's the question. Could that have happened? And the answer basically is yes, although it was worded slightly different. Could another person have done it? Clock the person out an hour or so later. Would that have been known if somebody did that? And the answer is no, that wouldn't have been known. When the state moved to exclude any reference to the state's investigation into third parties, the state moved to exclude any reference to the state's investigation into third parties. The trial court held a hearing on the motion in July of 2024. At the hearing, now listen, this is crazy. The state wants to exclude any mention in the trial that there's anybody else possibly investigated. They want the jury to only hear that only one person has ever been suspected of this crime. And so they want to move that any references to anybody outside of that party has never been discussed. That kind of shit happened in the Idaho 4 case as well. They want no discussion that anybody else was ever under investigation for that crime. It's always been one guy from the very beginning. And that's what they want the jury to hear. There's never been anybody else's mind, anybody other than the guy we have for it. At the hearing, and this is the shocker we're going to end with. At the hearing, Holder's wife testified that in 2018, that's a year or so after the murder, or less than a year after the murder, Holder told his wife that he had a fight with Westfall because Westfall wanted to up from animal slaughter to a different type of sacrifice. How do you up the stakes from animal sacrifices? What's after animal sacrifice? How do you up animal sacrifices? So Holder said that he got into a fight with his friend Westfall because Westfall wanted to up their ante from animal sacrifices to a different type of sacrifice. She also testified that Holder claimed that Westfall killed Abby with others. The wife actually said, Holder said, Westfall killed Abby, and that she needed to keep her mouth shut about it. So for the moment, that's enough. There may be a part 3 because there's enough of this document left where I could make a whole nother part about it, but that's enough for today. That's enough for today. You tell me, people, how it is that these two guys who are into pagan rituals and admitted that they like to slaughter animals and wanted to up their game and maybe move to human sacrifice and had pictures posted on their social media of dead girls with sticks on top of them, had tattoos of a rune that shapes the same way or is very similar to the sticks that were placed on one of the victims' bodies, the body positioning of the foot underneath the body like the Odin symbol at one of their houses, the shape of the Fehu rune on the tree that looks like the blood shape of the rune on the tree by one of the victims. All of that shit we should completely ignore for 5.5 years and go after Richard Allen, put him in solitary confinement when he has major depressive disorder. Do it outside of the guidelines of anybody with that kind of condition should be in solitary confinement no more than 30 days and put him in there for 13 months. Break his mind and his will and make him psychotic to the point that he's rambling about how he created World War III, and if he goes to sleep, the world's going to blow up, and he wants to be cryogenically frozen, and he sees shit that's not there, and he eats his own shit and his own poop. But during moments of lucidity, he says, yeah, I killed those girls. That'll be played to the jury, and they'll convict him and give him 130 years. I got nothing else to say. Thanks for listening. Bye.